Good morning, everyone. I call this session of the Public Service Commission to order. Madam Secretary, are there any changes to the final agenda?
There are no changes to the final agenda.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to take a moment to recognize two new commissioners, Commissioner Sheehan, Commissioner Bright. Welcome to the commission.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chair.
Great. And so now we will move on to the agenda. We'll first conduct a roll call of commissioners. When I call your name, please confirm that you are present. Commissioner James Alisi.
Present.
Commissioner David Valesky.
Here.
Commissioner John Majori.
Here.
Commissioner Jenna Bright.
Here.
Commissioner Denise Sheehan.
Here.
All right, perfect. Now, before we go to the regular agenda, do any commissioners wish to recuse from voting on item 301? Commissioner Alisi?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
No, I'll be voting.
Commissioner Majori?
No.
Commissioner Bright?
No.
And Commissioner Sheehan?
No, I'll be voting.
Thank you. We'll now move to the regular agenda. Item 301, case 24-E-0165, which initiates a grid of the future proceeding. It'll be presented today by Zerai Hagos, Robert Cully, Andrew Owens, and Stephanie McDermott are available for questions. Zerai, please begin.
Good morning, Chair Christian, Commissioners, and on behalf of staff, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Commissioners Bright and Sheehan. Today, I will be presenting item 301 in case 24-E-0165 in the matter of the grid of the future. The draft order before you initiates the grid of the future proceeding, outlining a number of significant initiatives that staff will lead over the course of the next 2 years, with an ongoing planning process that will continue beyond those initial deliverables. The goal of this proceeding is to develop and implement a comprehensive grid of the future plan that will unlock the grid flexibility services and benefits that are inherent within the many types of distributed energy resources that utility customers are choosing to purchase today. Thanks to the leadership of this commission, the deployment of distributed energy resources such as rooftop solar, battery storage, smart appliances, electric vehicles, and heat pumps has grown significantly across the state of New York. Policies dating back to the Reforming the Energy Vision, or New York REV proceeding, advanced a number of innovations to the utility business model and policies to animate the customer side of the market. A key element of the REV proceeding is the requirement that utilities file Distributed System Implementation Plans, or DSIPs, every 2 years. DSIPs outline each utility's progress and plans for implementing the Distributed System Platform, or DSP. Guided by the rate design principles, which the Commission established in the REV proceeding, the Commission went on to develop advanced cost-reflective rate designs, such as the enhanced standby rates and value stack compensation for DER in the Value of Distributed Energy Resources proceeding, which many know as VDER. The value stack tariff replaced traditional net energy metering for commercial customers in March 9th of 2017, and it aligns DER compensation with the value DERs create to the grid at specific times and locations for both wholesale and distribution level avoided costs, and for environmental value of eligible clean energy injections to the grid. The VDER proceeding and value stack have been referenced in countless articles, publications, and podcasts as a model for DER compensation in other jurisdictions, and for good reason. When coupled with the Commission-authorized incentive programs like New York Sun and the Market Acceleration Bridge incentives for energy storage, New York has grown its distributed solar industry to approximately 4.3 gigawatts of capacity online as of today, along with approximately 1 gigawatt of energy storage that has either entered into service or has an award from a Commission-authorized program. On the demand side, there have been nearly 60,000 heat pump installations since the inception of the Clean Heat program in 2020. The investor-owned utilities have also integrated over 1.3 gigawatts of demand response resources which participate in the utility demand response programs, with a similar quantity enrolled in the New York Independent System Operator programs. This includes over 107,000 smart thermostats enrolled in the residential demand response programs administered by the investor-owned utilities. Additionally, there are over 210,000 electric vehicles on New York roadways today, and the Commission has directed the creation of managed charging programs in each utility with separate programs for residential and commercial customers. As of today, the residential programs are live, and Con Edison and Orange and Rockland have begun to enroll medium and heavy-duty vehicles in their commercial programs, while the other utilities are in the process of implementing their commercial managed charging programs. The Commission has also approved optional time of use and optional demand-based standby rates for residential customers in every investor-owned utility, which are whole home rate alternatives that empower and incentivize customers to make grid and wallet beneficial decisions. These supportive Commission policies and programs have cultivated the local markets, created jobs, lowered costs, generated environmental benefits, and guiding the markets to invest in when and where the projects are needed the most. The draft order before you directs staff to provide 3 significant filings over the course of the next 2 years. First, the draft order directs staff to develop a grid flexibility study and file it by November 15th of 2024. The grid flexibility study will outline the current and future capabilities and levels of flexible resources, along with recommendations for how to use these resources in the context of grid planning and recommendations for near-term actions to enable growth in flexible resources. Second, the draft order directs staff to file the first Grid of the Future plan by December 31st of 2024. This first Grid of the Future plan will focus on recommendations to improve the Distributed System Implementation Plans, or DSIPs, described earlier during this presentation. Third, the draft order directs staff to file a second Grid of the Future plan by no later than December 31st of 2025. The order also lays out 9 elements that must be included in that plan. Number 1, deployment goals for each resource type broken down by the kinds of grid services they can provide. Number 2, key elements needed in the DSP and revisions to the DSIP process. Number 3, compensation structures for flexible resources. Number 4, potential customer savings and benefits. Number 5, outline roles of the key entities such as distribution utilities, the New York Independent System Operator, and other market participants. Number 6, the appropriate level of digital technology needed to provide situational awareness, control flexible resources, and settle transactions. Number 7, physical and cybersecurity protocols. Number 8, the varying grid needs by time and location. And number 9, equitable approaches to allocating the costs and benefits related to the investments proposed in the plan. New York's landmark Climate Act, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, establishes targets that include 70% renewable energy by 2030 and a zero-emissions grid by 2040, along with an economy-wide greenhouse gas reduction target of 40% versus 1990 levels by 2030 and an 85% reduction by 2050. These ambitious and necessary climate and clean energy targets will drive a significant transformation of the state's power grid and its operation. Current estimates from work underway in the coordinated grid planning process suggests that peak demand could increase from today's levels by as much as 60% or 16 gigawatts by 2040. This large increase in peak demand could require a significant investment in traditional T&D infrastructure along with more peaking generation capacity, both of which could lead to higher costs for consumers if not properly managed. The grid flexibility study that staff will undertake in 2024 will provide detailed estimates regarding the potential for flexible resources to avoid or reduce the costs of rising demand, in addition to identifying other reliability, resiliency, and operational benefits. The U.S. Department of Energy Pathways to Commercial Liftoff Report for Virtual Power Plants estimates that VPPs could offset approximately 10 to 20% of peak demand across the U.S. by 2030, which indicates New York Grid Flexibility Study could identify several gigawatts of new potential flexible resources. Staff believes that through the development and expansion of programs, systems, and infrastructure that enable customer-side flexibility, we can improve reliability and reduce costs of the grid expansion needed to facilitate New York's transition to a fully decarbonized economy. And perhaps most importantly, the programs, rates, and operating practices such as aggregations and virtual power plants that are enabled through this proceeding will create meaningful opportunities for customer savings. This concludes my presentation. Rob Cully, Andy Owens, Stephanie McDermott, and I are here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Great presentation and good work on putting this together, and really appreciate the emphasis on the opportunities this creates for us. In January this year, Governor Hochul directed the department to identify the investments needed to harness innovation and build out a truly affordable, resilient, and clean electric grid. And this draft order, if we approve it today, is the commission bringing that governor's directive to life. Now, while discussing this order, you highlighted a number of past efforts. You mentioned REV, Reforming the Energy Vision, distributed system platforms, VETR, and other initiatives aligned with the governor's directive. And so when I look at this order today, I recognize that this is not simply a new beginning, but a continuation of efforts that started long before the arrival of many of us sitting on the commission today. The forward thinking of our predecessors on the commission has left us well positioned to meet the governor's directive and to address the challenges faced by our energy systems. That our energy systems face challenges should not be a surprise, and it's not a secret. And these challenges, in my mind, are unprecedented, but not unique to New York. They're the type of challenges to be expected from any 100-plus-year-old system built under a set of paradigms that are quickly being made obsolete through the progress of technology and evolving societal needs. Challenges that are further amplified by severe weather events that are increasingly more severe, more frequent, and more varied in impacts than ever before. Challenges that can be addressed through technology to make the system more flexible, adaptable, and equitable in ways not previously imagined. So by taking advantage of the technology available to us and taking steps to prepare for what we anticipate to come, this flexible and adaptable approach envisioned through the order will allow us to be more efficient and targeted in the solutions we identify for meeting our needs. And this flexibility, most importantly, can be aligned with the actions of individual consumers, benefiting not just the individual, but also society as a whole. And to do anything else would be to consign ourselves to a future of limited opportunities, increased risks, and higher cost. And so I see this order as being aligned with the Commission's overall mission and most certainly in the public interest. And I want to thank you and staff for bringing this to us today. Thank you, Zora. And with that, Commissioner Lisi.
Thank you, Chairman. And once again, welcome to the new commissioners. I would just like to make a comment or two on this, and in doing that, thank you for the delivery today, and as well that the public should know we receive briefings on all of these things well ahead of these meetings that we have. But in looking at this, I can't help but notice, and it just raised my eyebrows a little bit, because It says that we're doing this or going to do this upon approval by the commission to ensure a smooth flow of new energy procedures and delivery to the general public as outlined in the CLCPA, which was given to us about 5 years ago now. But there is a paragraph in here that I find interesting. I'd just like to read it, and then I'll go away. So, it says, ideally, the plan would help ensure electricity users, customers, have the amount of energy they want, when they want it, and in the form that they want it. So my observation is simply this. In the form that they want it may not be in line with what the legislature and the CLCPA has already defined. So there will be constraints built into anything that a future report or recommendation will have. For example, people that want to keep gas, stoves, natural gas, companies that want to produce energy with fuel methods that are not consistent with the CLCPA. So at least when I mention those three things, the amount they want, the way they want it, and that they will be bridled. This report will be bridled already going in because the CLCPA is going to govern over what the general public might want. Just an observation, and I don't mean to be long-winded about it, but I think as we go back and forth, because it's the department telling the commission to tell the department to come up with a plan for the commission. If you read that, that's pretty confusing. So I wish you good luck, and we look forward to what you come up with in the future, but I will be supporting it because I'm interested in seeing the outcome as much as anything else.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to take a brief moment to also welcome our new commissioners, Commissioner Bright, Commissioner Sheehan. I know that all of us are really looking forward to your contributions over the months and years ahead. And it does strike me that there is sort of a historical nature about both of your nominations, and I do want to acknowledge the governor's leadership in making those nominations. Zerai, you mentioned, as we all often do, the 70 by 30 targets. Well, the two new commissioners who are with us now on the commission will be here, the first two commissioners who will be here in 2030 when we reach, hopefully successfully, that 70 by 30 target. So again, I think there's a historical nature to that, and again, welcome to you both. Zerai, to you and to your team, outstanding job. You know, it's not every session that we do initiating orders, so that in and of itself makes this a pretty big deal. And I think as time goes by, we'll look back on this particular initiating order as being an exceptionally big deal. I certainly have high hopes for the work that you'll be leading, and I know we're in good hands with you taking the lead on that. I do just want to just read a couple of brief paragraphs which speak to me and speak to the importance of this Grid of the Future proceeding, if I might, by way of entering them into the record in my voice. The first paragraph from page 3 of the draft order says, the objective of this Grid of the Future proceeding is to unlock innovation and investment to deploy flexible resources, such as DERs and virtual power plants, to achieve our clean energy goals at a manageable cost and at the highest levels of reliability. And I just want to repeat those two phrases, at a manageable cost and the highest levels of reliability. I think that's critically important. Drawing from insights gained through the Market Design and Integration Working Group and many other efforts, this proceeding is designed to enable a comprehensive approach that incorporates critical investments in responsive loads and distributed generation, as well as investments in the generation, transmission, and distribution systems. So I think very important paragraph. Second, a little bit later on in the order, we say that the Commission is initiating this proceeding to determine if possible, future actions that it could take to substantially promote the timely and effective evolution of the electric grid. The overall goal of this effort is to produce and maintain the plan to establish a comprehensive, integrated, cost-effective, and actionable framework for evolving the electric system. Implementation of the plan should result in lower infrastructure costs, improvements to reliability, and customer savings by effectively and timely supporting the new and changing grid needs driven by increasing electrification and intermittent generation. So again, I think those two paragraphs, at least for me, speak to the importance of this order. I also want to commend the fact that you fully intend to engage stakeholders in this process, which is always so important to the work that this commission does. And I know that we're making a commitment to holding at least one technical conference, I believe a little bit later this year. So with that, well done. I certainly plan on supporting the order and look forward to seeing future product come from this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
Thank you. So I have a question, and as Commissioner Lisi, well, before that, I'd like to join my colleagues in welcoming our two new commissioners. I've enjoyed introductory chats with you, and very much look forward to working with you over the next few years. So welcome. So my question on the topic at hand, as Commissioner Lisi had alluded to, we do have briefings beforehand, and I asked this in the briefing, and Commissioner Valesky asked a similar question. And so I know the answer, but I'm asking this for the purpose of public clarity. And the chair actually sort of alluded to the answer in that what this order represents is a continuation of what we've already been doing. But just for the sake of clarity, can you expand on why we are taking this up now as opposed to a couple of years ago? What is significant about the timing of this order?
Absolutely. So from my perspective, there are a lot of things that have to be ready simultaneously in order for the objectives of this order to actually come to fruition. And I pose that there's 5 reasons why now is the appropriate time for this Grid of the Future proceeding. Number 1, the rapid growth of DER adoption across the state of New York. Number 2, the status of the advanced metering infrastructure rollout in New York. Number 3, investment activity in the private sector. Number 4, the CLCPA's 0 by 40 target. And number 5, the lessons learned in New York. Now I'll expand a little bit on all 5 of those themes. First, and I alluded to this in my prepared remarks, New York and around the country, customers are purchasing DER in large volumes. Last year, EV registrations grew by approximately 50% year over year, and the Climate Action Council's integration analysis suggests that pace will need to continue between now and 2030 in order to meet our 2030 decarbonization goals. Since the program's inception, the Clean Heat Program has added approximately 59,000 heat pumps to the system as of today, and the governor has put a plan in place to achieve 2 million electrified homes or electrification-ready homes by 2030. We've seen continued growth in utility-connected smart thermostats with over 107,000 devices enrolled in the IOU's Bring Your Own Thermostat programs, and enrollments have been growing by 10 to 20% each year over the last 5 years in those programs. Analysis carried out in the recently updated energy storage roadmap suggests that approximately 12 gigawatts of storage will be needed by 2035 to support the expected demand growth in New York's climate policies. And separately, New York is well on track to meet its 10 gigawatts of distributed solar target by 2030. Customers will provide the majority of the capital for this investment on their own, regardless of flexibility programs. And if we can leverage even a small portion of the approximately 20 gigawatts of residential EV and heat pump load, for example, which we're expecting by 2030, to provide flexibility services, that could avoid gigawatts of conventional infrastructure upgrades, again, using resources that customers are already going to purchase. According to a study that DPS and NYSERDA published in 2022, the distribution substation upgrade costs that can be avoided through widespread deployments of managed charging in New York is as high as $13.6 billion of savings between now and 2050. We invested in that transportation electrification distribution system impact study and zoomed in on the distribution costs because we understand these costs are oftentimes overlooked or oversimplified in the most common long-term grid outlooks and studies. And we wanted to make sure we had reasonable cost estimates for the Commission as it considers policies and pathways for transportation electrification. The grid flexibility study outlined in the order will, of course, go far beyond the distribution system value and look at all relevant technologies, not just EVs. Having that comprehensive estimate of the potential flexibility services that can be generated by the most relevant resource types will allow the Commission to better prioritize future investments and decisions. It should also be noted that just this morning, the New York Independent System Operator announced the launch of their DER participation model, which was approved by FERC on Monday. Long on to the AMI rollout, AMI has now been deployed in the downstate utilities in New York, which include Con Edison, Orange and Rockland, and PSEG Long Island. NYSEG and RG&E, along with National Grid, are beginning the deployment of their smart meters, which are expected to be complete by 2027. The interval data that is transmitted via advanced meter infrastructure is a threshold requirement for the most advanced and dynamic rate designs and compensation structures that underpin most flexibility programs and market products. Now that AMI will soon be available to a large majority of New Yorkers, it's very appropriate that we re-examine the programs and rates we present to those customers. That transitions well to the third point, investment in the private sector. The DOE liftoff report on virtual power plants, which I mentioned in my opening remarks, outlines 3 business models for virtual power plants that are being deployed today. The first is utility-administered programs, where DER vendors and software as a service vendors partner with utilities to enroll customers in virtual power plants. Number 2 is manufacturer-administered programs, where manufacturers like Ford, Toyota, Tesla may enroll customers in a virtual power plant that they manage, again, partnering with other vendors, but it's the manufacturer who owns the enrollment process. Number 3 are the third-party aggregator programs, where a third party has the responsibility of enrolling customers and bidding those flexibility resources into utility or ISO market products. And there are companies active in all 3 of these business models today. And in New York, there are several examples of the first category of utility-administered programs. Most notably are managed charging and bring-your-own thermostat demand response programs. But more interestingly, we're now observing third-party aggregators beginning to enter the market, specifically in Con Edison, where AMI meters are currently available, and the market value for flexibility is reasonably strong. There is enough activity and investment in the private sector today in the technologies that manage these kinds of programs to suggest that now is a reasonable time to consider a holistic assessment of the potential and to identify new and expanded opportunities. In the context of the CLCPA's 0 by 40 target, the order notes we have a separate proceeding to address the zero emissions resources that are needed to maintain a reliable system in 2040 when the electric system has transitioned away from fossil fuels. Flexible resources like virtual power plants and grid-responsive DER can help address those needs. However, we also know it takes upwards of 10 years to develop power plants and transmission and distribution infrastructure in New York, which means our grid planning for CLCPA needs to start evaluating options now. And as a matter of fact, the coordinating grid planning process is doing that right now. But the more detailed insights from the grid flexibility study and the grid of the future plans, that are expected to be developed regarding the potential for flexibility services, can help New York's grid planners account for these beneficial resources and potentially avoid the development of unneeded traditional infrastructure, but only if we can properly value these resources in time to alter our development pipelines. And I'll close with lessons learned. Simply put, New York has gained a lot of valuable experience with the many programs we've implemented across the state, across our 6 investor-owned utilities, and at PSEG Long Island over the last 10 years. For each utility program, each R&D program or market development project funded through the Clean Energy Fund. We've uncovered best practices and stumbled over countless barriers, some that we were able to overcome and some that have ended projects. Now is the right time to consolidate all of those lessons learned, paired with a comparison to where the potential benefits are greatest, so the Commission can prioritize the next wave of investments to enable the grid of the future.
Thank you very much. It's a very thorough answer. It's almost as if you were anticipating that I was going to ask that question. But thank you very much. It's a terrific presentation. I think that this order makes a lot of sense, and I'll be supporting.
Thank you. Commissioner Bright.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, fellow commissioners, for the warm welcome, and staff for the warm welcome as well. I have no questions on this order, but I did have a couple comments and want to thank staff for being so thorough in this great order. And while this is straightforward, it recognizes the need for careful planning towards our clean energy future for the benefit of all New Yorkers. This order takes a thoughtful approach to the how. We know the why. We're giving New Yorkers the tools to fight back against our shared challenge, which is the climate crisis. Emissions are making the climate crisis worse, and we know we should be investing not in the wrong direction, but in the right direction. And so the why is clear. This order is part of the how, and is another example of New York and this department leading the way in that how. It's a demonstration of our state's careful, thoughtful planning so that we have a system that is better equipped, more advanced, more flexible, and ready for the renewable resources that we will continue to bring online in a cost-effective, equitable, and safe way, and in a way that ensures reliability. Thank you for this great presentation. I will be supporting, and I look forward to digging into the plans that come out of this initiating order.
Thank you. Commissioner Sheehan.
Thank you, Chair Christian. I'll join Commissioner Bright in thanking everyone for the very warm welcome, staff and fellow commissioners. I am honored and privileged to be here today and excited to join my fellow commissioners in the important work ahead. I would like to thank department staff for their presentation today and for all their hard work and responsiveness, and I'll add patience, in briefing me on this item, as well as the consent agenda items. It's been a whirlwind few days, but I appreciate everybody's time and efforts. I also appreciate staff in ensuring that my suggestions were incorporated in the final draft order. I'm certainly delighted that the first matter before me as commissioner is this item 301 in the matter of the grid of the future. As staff described, the order initiates the grid of the future proceeding and represents what I think is a significant step forward in New York's efforts to modernize our electric grid. The Commission's initial Reforming the Energy Vision REV order began a process in 2014. It's hard to imagine it's been 10 years. Really, 10 years went by fast. To evolve our grid to a cleaner, resilient, reliable system by establishing new business models, customer-oriented policies, new rates and tariffs to support deployment of distributed energy resources, DERs. Since that order, related Commission actions have supported the deployment of hundreds of megawatts of new, clean, distributed energy resources throughout New York State. Also, in that same 10-year period, the state adopted the CLCPA, or Climate Act, with nation-leading goals for renewable energy deployment and grid decarbonization. This Grid of the Future proceeding I see as building on these major initiatives and tying them together, as well as our other supportive policies and programs, in an effort to create one holistic strategy for a more affordable, reliable, and decarbonized grid. By unlocking innovation and investment to deploy these resources, flexible resources, which, as you've heard described, include virtual power plants, responsive loads, V2G, responsive DER, this new proceeding is an important opportunity for the state to achieve its clean energy goals affordably and provides the potential for significant customer savings, all while maintaining a safe and reliable grid. and all things that we're excited about. And I share other commissioners' comments with respect to the, looking forward to the work to follow. I also want to just also commend the order's inclusion of stakeholder engagement. I think this will be helpful in terms of bringing expertise from the field, in terms of identifying barriers as well as solutions to deploying flexible resources. So for all of those reasons, I'm very pleased to support the order. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'll do a call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to institute the grid of the future proceeding as discussed. Commissioner Alisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Commissioner Bright?
Yes.
Commissioner Sheehan?
Yes.
The item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff. And with that, now move to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any items on the consent agenda, beginning with Commissioner Alisi?
No, I'll be supporting the entire consent agenda.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief comment on a collection of 4 items that are on the consent agenda: 362, 377, 378, and 379. They are the Chippy items, the Champlain Hudson Power Express items. We have, for a number of months, been addressing items that have to do with this very, very important project. This month we have 4 items that address the project itself. 362 does minor changes to segments 6 and 12 of the environmental management and construction plan that we had already approved. 377 amends the certificate for a reroute in the town and village of Catskill, and certainly want to acknowledge our partners at the New York State Department of Transportation, our sister agency. 378 approves segment 18B's environmental management and construction plan. This is the 96.5-mile route that travels under Lake Champlain from the Canadian border to Washington County. And 379 approves segment 23's environmental management and construction plan. This is a 3.5-mile underground route from Con Ed's Rainey substation to the Power Authority's Astoria Annex. I take a moment just to identify those, in particular to underscore the fact that we are just about 2 years away from that project coming fully online, or anticipated to come fully online. I mentioned during 301, as many of my colleagues did as well, the word reliability. And in 301, that word appears frequently throughout that order. I think it's certainly not a stretch to say that this particular project speaks as much to reliability as almost any other project that is taking place across the state. So it's critically important that all stakeholders, the company, our sister state agencies, Department of Public Service staff who did an outstanding job on these items, continue to work together and make sure that we all do everything that we need to be doing to continue along that path toward a spring of 2026 date when that project will be fully coming online. And what does coming online mean? 1.25 megawatts of renewable electricity delivered to New York City. So really, really important. And again, I'm pleased to see these 4 items on the agenda today, and we'll be supporting them as well as the rest of the consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. I would like to explain why I'm going to concur on 4 items, which are items 381 through 384, which are 23E 0626, 0550, 0420, and 0471 regarding Oswego, Fulton, Amsterdam, and Niagara Falls. I don't normally like to concur rather than cast a yes vote, because a concurrence has the same result as a yes. However, I'm concurring on these 4 streetlight orders today to make it clear that I'm doing so because there is no reason in the record to vote no, nor is there even a request to vote no in the record. That said, I'm uneasy because in what would normally be an extremely routine matter, or for routine matters, there are objections raised for stated reasons that the order will explain do not apply. Among my concerns, however, is that the stated reasons for the objection, which are not relevant to our decision making, might mask some more substantive reasons that could be relevant. So, what am I talking about? In all four cases, the IBEW labor union submitted motions to hold the petitions in abeyance until an alleged labor dispute, which for the duration of these remarks I will refer to as the labor dispute, is resolved. I don't recall ever seeing motions like this before, at least in this type of proceeding. The stated reasons have to do with a series of legal precedents that the union interprets to mean that the PSC should not act on the motions while the labor dispute remains unresolved. I am sympathetic, but convinced by the staff analysis that the union cites cases that don't apply to the present circumstance. The union does not request that we deny the petitions, nor does it outline any reasons to deny the petitions. The staff analysis is unchallenged, and I have no suspicions about the staff analysis being incorrect. That said, for lack of a better way of putting it, I get the feeling that I don't really know what's going on here. There isn't a mechanism available for me as a commissioner to communicate with the interested parties to try to get at the bottom of what's really at issue, let alone negotiate a solution. So, in the absence of any reason whatsoever to vote against these petitions, I'm not going to vote no. These orders will explain the criteria the DPS uses in evaluating petitions to transfer ownership of streetlights better and more clearly than similar past orders. This is good going forward, but I am somewhat concerned that what we make clear now would not necessarily have been as clear earlier. The union solely relies on an argument to this commission about what it perceives to be relevant legal precedents that they believe compel us to hold the petitions in abeyance without making any substantive argument against the petitions themselves, consistent with the actual criteria by which we make our decisions. But how would they have known to do otherwise? I can imagine that issues tangential to the labor dispute could conceivably be relevant to the criteria for our decisions outlined in today's orders. But just because I can imagine it doesn't make it true, and without such information in the record, my imagination alone is not a reason to vote no. To repeat myself for the sake of absolute clarity, there is no argument in the record for voting to reject these petitions. I would have preferred to have voted down the motions to hold the petitions in abeyance separately during the public comment period, thus allowing the IBEW to come back and present any information that might be on point if such information exists. But the public comment period is long since over. We will say in the order that our decision today is not enough to effectuate the transfer of ownership, but that today's action is but one of several requirements, and that there is plenty of time for the IBEW to seek relief from a court, which this commission is not. I thought to myself that if one of those requirements is the conclusion of the labor dispute, perhaps we could work that into the order itself, reiterating that fact by making the effective date concurrent with the resolution of the dispute. However, it is my understanding that the resolution of the dispute is not one of the requirements for the transfer of ownership, so that's not an option. Also, everyone agrees that it is not the role of the PSC to adjudicate any aspect of the labor dispute. We are not weighing in on any disputed items in the context of that process. That said, opposing sides in that dispute submitted comments urging us to either hold off on making a decision or to move ahead for reasons that are relevant to that dispute. The union's position is that if we approve the petitions, quote, the union will likely be left without an adequate remedy and the grievance may be rendered moot, unquote. While National Grid disagrees and writes that if the IBEW prevails in the separate grievance process, it will be provided with suitable relief regardless of what actions we take in this proceeding. So we are left in a position where we are not weighing in on who is right and who is wrong on this point, because that's a matter for the grievance process itself or for court. But both sides have opinions about the relevance of our actions within the context of the grievance process. What's happening in that process has no effect on what's happening in this process, but it isn't for us to say if the reverse is true or not. It would have been nice if the grievance process had been resolved by now so that the question isn't put to the test by our acting on these petitions. It has been several months since the union filed its motion. While we're not granting an abeyance, if what the union was looking for was time, they effectively got that. Sadly, the dispute is not resolved. I'm also concerned that 3 of the 4 orders today were on the preliminary March agenda and that a 4th has been added now. It is entirely possible that more such cases will come before us in the future before the labor dispute is resolved. If so, there should be no confusion going forward that the legal argument for abeyance presented here doesn't hold, but that there should also be clarity in terms of what it is that we are evaluating. My hope is that with such matters cleared up by these orders, if there is information on point in future cases, new public input will reflect that understanding. So for these reasons, I am concurring, and on everything else, I'll be voting yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Bright?
I will be voting yes on the entire consent agenda.
Thank you. And Commissioner Sheehan?
Thank you, Chair. I am recusing from item number 369 and item number 371, and I'm otherwise supportive of the consent agenda.
Thank you. I'll now do the call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Lisi?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Yes on all items except for the 4 that I previously identified, 381 through 384, in which I will be concurring.
Thank you. Commissioner Bright?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. And Commissioner Sheehan?
Yes on all items except those that I'm recused from, 369 and 371. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, the items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. Madam Secretary, is there anything further to come before us today?
There's nothing further to come before you that requires a vote.
Thank you. And so with that, our regular agenda for today is concluded. But before we close, at this time, I'd like to share some words from our former colleague, former Commissioner John Howard. Madam Secretary, I believe you have a statement.
Yes. So this is the statement. Chairman Christian and Commissioners, I want to take the opportunity to officially say goodbye to you and the women and men of the Department of Public Service. Your support and experience made my term as Commissioner extremely rewarding and pleasant. There's no doubt in my mind that the department's staff is among, if not the best, in the nation. Your professionalism and experience serve the residents of New York State at the highest of levels, even if your work is largely out of public view. Keep up the excellent work and keep the faith. To the members of the Commission, thank you for your camaraderie and friendship. The task ahead is daunting and unprecedented, requiring a level of judgment and understanding that will shape New York's future for decades. Just, reasonable, safe, and reliable are the guiding principles that help you interpret and enforce the Public Service Law. There will be many shades of gray in the future. Your charge is making them black and white. Farewell for now, Excelsior, John B. Howard.
Thank you. And with that, I adjourn today's session. Thank you, everyone.